Hey, everybody, it's Rob Seaver, Executive Director with LeadsCouncil. We're bringing you the next on-air podcast. I'm super excited about this. I know I say this all the time, but this is somebody that I've been chasing, somebody that I've been wanting to get on our podcast for a long time. And there are reasons why it's taken this long, but it always will work out in the end. I'm sure of it. And I'm going to introduce you to my guest, Kathy Bryan, Chief Marketing Officer with Digital Media Solutions. Kathy, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for having me here. I am very excited to be here with you.
I am also. Look, if we all think back 2 years ago, we probably had no idea where we would be sitting in 18, 12, 24 months, down the road. And certainly, I think that I remember, I'm going to go back into January or February, I think it was last year, and I got a call from you and Melissa Ledesma, and you were giving me some bad news that you were not going to be able to make my show in Orlando. Do you remember that?
I
remember
that moment. I absolutely do.
Not going to make it. But obviously, fast forward now, some 18 months or whatever it is. My math is always about as good as my reading online. But what I could say is that what we didn't know was really what was going to be in store for us for the next year plus. And here we are now, fast forward in the month of March, I believe we're in, about ready for me to go to another trade show, our first since that shutdown. But it was a tough time, and I can't imagine what life was like for you during that time, because not only were you worried about what are we going to do with LeadsCon or whatever the trade show was, but this pandemic was rapidly showing a major disruption that was coming toward not just an individual, but DMS in general. There was going to be a shift in people and where they're located. And so help me understand, going back to that time frame a little bit, and we're going to get back into some of the history and things and tie it all up, but help me understand, when you called me, what was life like back then? Because I know what life was like for me on the other end of that phone call when you called me.
Oh, my goodness. It is almost exactly a year ago, because March 13th was my first day working from home last year. But this decision, of course, was made a couple of weeks prior to that. And it was about going to your show, and then we also had made a decision about LeadsCon at the exact same time, because what we realized is there was too much uncertainty around going. And even though we knew we were potentially taking a huge hit by not being at these shows, we could calculate or quantify that hit to a certain extent. What we couldn't quantify was if we made a wrong decision by going to those shows. And so it was a really hard decision, but we decided we had to put the health and the personal mindset comfort, I guess, like the personal comfort of our people ahead of anything else. And it was tough, because we were so excited to partner with LeadsCouncil and be at your show. We had some really good plans there, and we've always gone really big at LeadsCon, and we had really big, exciting plans, and it was not an easy decision. Immediately after we made that decision, we made those phone calls, then we had to really make sure that everybody inside DMS understood that this was the right decision, because there was some like, are we being too aggressive? Are we being too drastic with this? And while it felt that way initially, by this time, by March 15th of 2020, it was becoming very clear that we had made the right decision, and everybody was feeling very good, very comfortable with the decision we made.
I think that there are a few things throughout this time frame that really stick out to me, and I want to cover a few of them. One of them actually you weren't involved with. This was on another podcast or webinar that I was doing, and Ross Shankin was on, CEO at the time of Janaya, was on, and he was asked, is there anything about the pandemic or something that you would point out or look at as being a defining moment for the industry or for Janaya? And it was interesting, his answer was, I think I want to point out DMS's leadership in all of this, which caught me kind of off guard that he even looked at it that way. But looking back, you guys were on the front of that. I don't think anybody else was even riding beside you at that time. I remember Joey Liner, obviously, Chief Revenue Officer for you guys, being fairly vocal out on social media, which, I think some people were like scratching their head wondering, is he overreacting? Is DMS overreacting? And, I think it probably and most likely comes down to, the vision of Fernando and Joe Marinucci and, the tremendous leadership within DMS that, obviously coming out of big M&A periods for you guys and preparing for public and all of the things that's happened that we'll get into, it's obvious that DMS had the pulse on something that the majority of the industry didn't at the time. And I would imagine that it just felt like you guys were a bit out alone in some of this. And I don't know, did you ever catch any kind of grief or any kind of, negativity about doing it so early?
I don't know if negativity is the right word. I do remember hearing that quote from Ross about DMS making the first move, and it was never intended to be a move that was going to influence others. At DMS, we often talk about leading by example within our industry, within our personal lives. So we do try to do that, but I don't know that this was meant to be that moment. This was really meant to be there's uncertainty ahead, and we want to make sure we're being proactive instead of reactive. So we look back and we realize it was absolutely the right decision at the time. We knew that it was the decision that felt right. We didn't know what was going to be coming in the next month.
I look at your background and did a quick, just search out there, and I stayed off the post office websites where your picture is obviously hanging from the walls as top wanted. But
obviously,
I will tell you that I didn't ask any of this of you before to try to understand, but you have a wide background, have a diverse background. You've been through some major places, the Mortgage Bankers Association, Choice Hotels International, McCann, the Bornstein Group. I mean, so, your pedigree speaks for itself, which now makes a lot more sense, because I remember one day you and I were talking at some point, and I was just like, holy cow, you're going to be the chief marketing officer of a publicly traded company. And it just blew my mind, because, I deal with other publicly traded companies, but just to have somebody that I talk to and deal with and have seen, come through with Sparkroom and all of the history that we've had together with the council, I was super proud. But nothing prepared me for the morning where I woke up to seeing you standing in New York City on that platform, ringing the bell with, your coworkers and owners and just the people who had brought you up there. And this was in the middle of the pandemic. Help our viewers understand a little bit. Obviously, at this point, people know DMS is a publicly traded company. A big shift. That's a big deal in our industry when somebody does that. And so you were there. You were part of that in the middle of a pandemic. Traveling to New York, and people weren't going to New York at the time. But here you are, and we're going to get into this. A female in charge of the marketing side of a huge organization. I remember. Somebody told me this thing was, nearly $1 billion a year. And then that's a big deal. And you're standing in front of, the cameras, and something that most people in their lives never get to do. What was that like for you?
It was absolutely amazing. I mean, I should start off with saying that it was a moment that was meant for so many more people. And it's so frustrating that it happened in the middle of the pandemic. I feel very lucky that I live in New Jersey. So for me, it was just like I had to wake up a little bit early and drive over the river to get there. I got to park right in front of the New York Stock Exchange. So like that in itself was cool, because normally I probably wouldn't drive my own car, but I wasn't going to get into someone else's car. So in the middle of a pandemic. So I have a picture of my car parked right there. I took a picture that morning and I sent it to my older brother who works on Wall Street and my dad who spent his entire career on Wall Street. And I was like, the parking's pretty easy downtown. I don't know what you guys are always talking about. But it was amazing because I grew up with like Wall Street being the talk of the dinner table, right? And because of my dad's career there. And I had never been to the floor before, but I knew so much about it from hearing about it as a kid. And so being there, not because my dad invited me to come on a tour because I'm the child of, but being there because I earned my spot there because the company that I am a part of is going public. It was amazing. It was also bizarre because the floor was completely empty. So you hear stories of like people fighting over each other and it was not that at all. I've got a picture. I didn't even realize until I looked at the picture of it. There's like computer screens and like a person. And the rest of the floor is empty because It's July in New York City and that's just what it was. So it was amazing. It was one of the coolest moments of my life, and I can't wait until we can go back and do a makeover or do this again. I'm losing my words, but do this again when we can have more people there and we can hear the excitement of the people on the floor and have more of the DMS family there.
Is that something they promised you guys? They said that you guys can come back and have a redo?
Yes, we can have a redo. So we just are waiting for it to be the right time.
That's awesome. I have to be honest with you. I mean, I kind of lived that vicariously through you because I knew somebody. I never know somebody other than off the TV or something. But it was super cool to see you up there. So a very proud moment for I'm sure yourself, but I mean just for the industry and people who are tied to you and have seen along the way. So such I have a soundboard over here. I want to do the applause track so much just because it's just a warrant.
Thank you, Rob.
But, we had this pandemic. We obviously, and are you guys still working remote or have you moved back or has it been done in chunks or how is that working?
We are all officially remote and officially remote forever. We have our headquarters in Clearwater is still there, though nobody is officially working there right now. And some of our other offices, we've got some leases that we're still a part of, so long-term plans are a little bit fluid. But we used to have, I think, 15 offices across the country and one in Canada, and we closed every office that was a small office. So it's only the larger ones that had some of the leases that I think the leases are still active. But it's great. There's been not a single hiccup being remote and working with people remotely. So we've realized that there's much more opportunity for our people and from a recruiting standpoint because we can, we're open to anyone across the United States now. So it's really fantastic. We've got some people even that I think are not always in the same location, so they travel as they work because they've got the flexibility to be able to do that, which is super cool.
I look at just the change and the upheaval and just the difference that a year now has made. It's incredible. And when we take the microscope even further off of that and look at the social things that have happened out in the world with Black Lives Matter and gender equality and sexual preferences and all of the things that have really risen to the forefront as it relates to just news and just immersion and things and obviously from the council's perspective we created a diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee which you're part of and others with DMS are part of, but also and it was interesting because I heard Melissa talk about this the other day, the women of martech, and I have to believe that in all of the things that have happened to you in your world, as much as you look back fondly at that moment on Wall Street and being there ringing the bell with Joe and Fernando I have to think that this Women of Martech has to be something that ranks right up there. Am I right about that?
You're absolutely right. We are 1 month away from our 1 year anniversary, and we are very close to 1,000 members, which is beyond our wildest expectations of how quickly we would grow. Melissa and I talk about it sometimes. I'm like, how? Well, why?
I say the same thing.
What?
Like, how? I have
what we've
25 on my subcommittee. How?
Well, there's a lot that goes into it for sure. And one of the things that I think is very important is that we are helping other people, where a lot of the professional organizations, it is about helping yourself. And so when you get to choose, am I going to do this, that, or the other, I think this organization that you choose to be a member because you want to help other people, I think it is the right time for that. People really want to help other people. And women especially are just known for not always helping themselves as much as they will help their friends or their colleagues. So I think it is
more about what Women of Martech really. Why did you start it? Sure. And what was, what is has the mission morphed over the year, and what are you looking for, and why would somebody join?
Great question. So Women of Martech is aiming to increase the recognition and power of women in our industry. Essentially, I mean, it's no secret, right? You look around and there's not enough women within the MarTech industry, especially at those leadership levels. There's a lot of reasons that you can hear, if you ask people why, you're going to get a lot of reasons. But what we realized is that if we could make people understand the power of the women within the industry, then a lot of those reasons that people have for why there's not more women and why there aren't more women at the leadership level within MarTech would go away, because it would become clear that having women as part of the industry is essential, because they are powerful, they're innovating, they're creating revenue, they're refining processes, they're doing so many cool things that, of course, you want more of this. It's really awesome stuff. So really what we are doing is we are amplifying the voices of the women who are doing really cool things. And we're doing that by writing their stories, sharing their stories, and then pushing those stories out through a variety of channels. And it's working already because of this. Women who have shared their stories are getting recognition, and they're getting opportunities presented to them in terms of job offers, in terms of speaking opportunities at conferences. So we are seeing that what we're doing, the mission of getting people to understand the power of women, is working. That when people see that power, when they see that women do bring good things, there's a desire to have more women at the table.
I think I shouldn't have been surprised, but I think it did surprise me. One, I didn't know the origins of the group, and so found that out last week, or the week before, which I thought was really cool. But it seems as if your ownership have a strong commitment to help this organization, one, get off the ground, but also survive and thrive. And I think that's a testament to the leadership of DMS and what I know about Joe and Fernando as well. And is that how you feel about this as well?
Absolutely. So DMS is the founding and currently only sponsor of Women of MarTech. I'm sure as we continue to grow, that will change. We'll have more sponsors who work with Women of MarTech. But this did come from a conversation where Joe and I were talking about the MarTech industry and the makeup of the MarTech industry, and that was a big part of the inspiration for there must be something that can be done. So absolutely, there is support from the very top at Digital Media Solutions for women to be a big part of the growth of Digital Media Solutions itself, but also the industry as a whole.
I think I see that, especially with the commitment and the involvement and just everything that DMS has given us as it relates to the DE&I side of what we're doing as well, including Black Lives Matter, all of the women groups that, the Ladies of LeadsCon, obviously another group that we support. And so I can honestly say, just by witnessing, I've seen DMS step up in a huge way. And so this is just one of those shining examples of that. If somebody wants to get involved, how do they do that?
Really, just go to our website and apply to become a member. We do not have a membership fee, which I'm sure is also contributing to our size, but we made the conscious decision in 2020 not to charge because it was the wrong year. As we entered 2021, we realized the more people we have amplifying our voices and the voices of our members, the more we are able to achieve our mission. So applying a membership fee would only be an obstacle to grow our membership. So it really is just a matter of going to womenofmartech.com and applying for membership. And then after that, there's lots of ways to get increasingly involved with the group.
What have you found has been probably the most rewarding of being president of this organization and being involved with it over the year? What's been the most satisfying and or even surprising thing for you?
I think over the past couple of months, when we've really started seeing the success stories of how Women of MarTech has helped women achieve that next step or get that next opportunity, that to me has been that moment of, oh my gosh, this is working. The thing that we thought would work, amplifying female voices, really is working, which means that the more we do it, the more success we are going to help our members have. So that has been the most gratifying thing. I need to call out Melissa Ledesma, who is the executive director for Women of MarTech, who is just able to achieve so much, organize so much, execute so much within this group that none of it would exist without Melissa.
I have to call her up. As another executive director, I'm just going to have to ask for pointers because I'm seeing what she's doing. I'm like, dang, I need to get some teaching up there for me. She's doing such a good job. I love both of you guys. It's been fun to be experienced or to have the experience working with you. As I move a little bit further away from that and get back to business as usual, I told you that I'm leaving soon to go to Lead Generation World in Orlando. These are shows that are starting to come back. We know that LeadsCon's planning to have one in late October. There are a couple of other shows along the way that we're doing. And so for me, I wouldn't call it normal or getting back to normal, but we are certainly trying to get some level of normalcy back into our world. For DMS, obviously I know that you have to be guarded about certain things, but for DMS, what do you see for this year or the rest of this year in your planning? And obviously you talked a little bit about, reevaluating how things were and how things are. What's the process for a CMO as you're looking for the next 6 to 12 months?
It's certainly not easy because there is still a lot of uncertainty ahead, both with regard to coronavirus in general, but also with people's comfort traveling and how and seeing how much people will prioritize conferences. Because if other people are or aren't prioritizing conferences, that will impact our desire to be there. We go to conferences to meet with people, so we need to make sure people are there. But really, I think right now it is mostly just keeping abreast of what the opportunities are and what the comfort level of our internal team is. At the current moment, we are still not traveling. The majority of our workforce is still not vaccinated, and I would never want to encourage somebody to travel if they don't feel comfortable traveling. And sometimes there is a little bit of pressure if a show is going on that people feel like they're supposed to versus it being an opportunity.
That level of comfort is definitely subjective, right?
Exactly.
They told me was it wrong that they air quoted when it's your choice?
Well, you're exactly right. And even though it will be totally by choice for, for a very long time, if not forever, it's uncertain if people will understand it as their choice, and we don't want to create any discomfort around decisions related to travel. That being said, I mean, we are actively researching shows that are in the second half of 2021 because we do believe that things may start opening up, and we want to make sure that we have all the information we need to make the right decisions when we decide that we're comfortable to start traveling to shows. So that's a long-winded answer to say, I don't know.
It's all right. You've become very politically correct in the last year, so I really appreciate it. Thank you. Actually, it's no different talking to you now that you're a celebrity and rock star, you know. It's just booking the time got to be a little tight. I have to be honest with you. I mean, you had made a comment before we started rolling the camera about how people have become comfortable with Zoom. Obviously, I read a story, and we were just talking about this on a previous call about how Zoom has become a noun now. And from a trademark standpoint, it's a big deal because you can't trademark something that's so ubiquitous that now we refer to it as Zooming. Google had the same problem with search and things like that. But I have become more comfortable in front of the camera. I've realized, especially a year now later from where we started, I think everybody's become some level of comfort. But do you think there was a trade-off? Because I know that, the term Zoom fatigue is out there, but in general, aren't we wired to be in person and meeting, with others where there's tactile and other things that come into play that this camera can't bring?
I would say absolutely yes, but on the flip side, it takes a really long time to travel to get to people. So I think what we did is we used to be on the road all the time. Now we're not on the road at all. And I believe the future, people are going to be evaluating not just the value of being in person, but also the cost of getting there. And I don't mean the cost of it cost me $400 to fly, but the cost in terms of how many hours does it take me to get there and how many hours am I away from my family to be there. If a 3-hour meeting in person with someone costs me a night away from my kids, I'm going to be weighing that and saying, is this something that needs to happen? What is the value of what I'm getting versus what I'm giving up? And I think this past year, people spending time at home being with their families, I think they realized that they were missing a lot more than they thought they did previously.
I mean, I would imagine DMS has figured this out and has supported that thought and that mindset. But do you feel that in general that this is just a blip, or do you think that this is really here to stay, where people can really weigh the cause and effect, where time really is money? I remember we used to have meetings with management, and we bought this little calculator clock that you put the salaries of the managers in the room, and you started having no meetings after that, because when you sit down and see that a meeting just cost you $2,500, you're like, wow, was that worth it? But in general, I guess my fear is, or concern is, that I love the fact that you're supported right now. Do you believe that that same level of support is going to be seen in 24, 36, 48 months? Just in your opinion.
It's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. I truly believe that digital media solutions, yes. Can I answer that question across the industry, across the country? No, but I believe that people at the highest levels have had opportunities to reconnect with their families that they wouldn't have previously. And so I believe that the decision making has changed at the highest levels, which means it will push down. And I think prioritizing family is going to continue to be important within that 24, 36 month time period. I think what's more in question is when, we're 5 years, 10 years out, will it completely change back? I hope it doesn't. I really, really want to go on a business trip right now. I really want a giant steak and a glass of red wine with one of those booths with the high back. I've got it all. I've got it all mapped out in my mind. there are great things about trips, about being on the road, but I think a lot of people were off balance, and what we're going to do is we're going to be finding what is that right balance as we enter back into the world of business travel.
I agree with you. I just feel that, will we see a profits over people scenario sneak back into the situation, or have we learned? And so I think time will only tell that. And it really is going to depend on, obviously, the success of the vaccination, the success of, people still holding a level of responsibility moving forward. I think it was amazing that we looked at the trends for the average flu that almost didn't show up this year because of the distancing and the masking and things. And so we've learned a lot. It's going to be interesting to see if companies have also learned that. I do know that, stepping back from leases and breaking those things and not having the physical building any longer, I think will weigh and factor into all that. It's going to be interesting. From a marketing perspective, shifting gears just a little bit, over the last year, have you seen communicating with people change, or the methods, or the frequency, or the channel? Has that taken a hit, and or in a good or positive way over the last year?
Yes, absolutely. There have been changes. I think what we've seen most of all is that people who plan out their communications months or a year in advance suffered this past year because they had to very quickly change everything, and they weren't necessarily prepared to be able to change everything. So I think the number one thing that we've seen, and this is like big companies, just small, is the need to be agile, the need to pay attention to what consumers are feeling and resonate with consumers based on how they're feeling right now is essential. And it's not just related to the pandemic. I mean, it is related to the other things. Like the moment Black Lives Matter became as big as it was last summer, there were brands who understood that they needed to be part of that conversation. And then there were other brands that never entered, and a third group that probably entered, but in a really inauthentic way. So it is being agile, but also understanding what are consumers expecting from you, and are you hitting on that, or are you just being agile and trying to hit on whatever's happening in the moment to benefit yourself? So I guess to say also that consumers expect brands to be part of the solution, which wasn't always the case. But I think that changed a lot last year specifically. It had been evolving, but certainly last year it kind of came to a head, and brands need to understand that now, that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
I agree. I hope that we get back to more of a customer service centric approach to serving the consumer, because I have felt over the years that it has eroded self-service, checkout lanes, McDonald's self-service ordering. It seems like everything that we've done for the consumer has just been about alienating and removing that human contact. The one thing that I hope to see go away forever is the term due to COVID. We no longer, I mean, how many times have we heard on those phone calls, due to COVID, you're about to enter into a 48-hour hold for the customer support staff, and I'm like, a year later, can we still effectively, as a marketer or a customer service organization, can we still a year later be saying due to COVID? I mean, I can't imagine that it's relevant any longer, or even a solid, defense.
No, I completely agree with you. It certainly seems like I have not figured out how to solve for this, therefore I'm still going to say that. But maybe it's the same thing as like our choices have recently changed. So make sure you listen to this recording before you push a number. It's just that default.
I don't know what the true answer is, but I wish I could find the people who recorded those due to COVID recordings.
What I do think is important, though, Rob, as you're talking about customer service and how to meet the needs of people, I completely agree with you that there is this desire to just put technology in front of human interactions. What I think is important always, though, is for anyone who is working with consumers to realize that there are different people out there that you're working with, and one solution does not meet everybody's needs. So there are the people who walk into McDonald's and they would so much rather have already ordered on their app and just walk in and get their food. There's the other group that really wants to talk to someone and say, please promise me you're not going to put onions on my sandwich, and have that confirmation, like you apparently.
I want to look that person in the eye and go, no onions, no onions. Actually, I like onions, so that's not what I'm going to request. I usually add mayonnaise, but and that's only because I want to make sure the sandwich is fresh. I don't want, no mustard. There's no mustard.
It's only in the South. The mustard's only in the South.
Kathy, is there anything from a marketing perspective, we're about to wrap this up, so I'm just trying to pick your brain. Is there anything that's fresh or new that you see on the horizon from a communication, from a platform, from a data metric, from anything that you see that's exciting that you want to get closer to or use more or check out? Is there anything out there? I know this is a curveball question, but you're a CMO of a publicly traded company. I want to know what you're thinking.
Sure. Well, I feel like I have had numerous conversations recently with regard to new social platforms that are coming out, and it's not something new right now because there's always new social platforms that are coming out and evolving. But I feel like the pace of the new social platforms has increased recently, and it's probably because so many people have become very active on social media over the past year as a thing to do, a way to communicate and connect. So that is something that I am definitely paying attention to, watching. A lot of social platforms, they come, they're niche, they stay niche, and then they go away. Other social platforms, they become bigger than you would ever expect, and then they take over to a certain extent. So I think like Clubhouse is one of the ones where it kind of came from out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it's this thing that everybody's talking about. One of the things I wonder is, once it is not a fear of missing out because I had to get invited to it, is there going to be a lot of attention placed on it like there is now? I don't know. But that's something that I'm always interested in hearing, what social platforms people are using, because I think what people are actually using is always more informational than just what is out there and what people are excited about.
I think it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, if you could fast forward the clock in 10 years, what would social media, what would that look like? And it was interesting when you mentioned Clubhouse, which I think everybody has on their radar. And I think it's the FOMO, but it also exclusivity in the marketer world always is a level of, excitement. But it's going to be interesting for me to look at a platform like that even stripped the video side of it out and went straight back to audio as a communication. And it's certainly informative. I've listened to and sat in many of those meetings and thought, wow, this is pretty cool to have access to this. I can't wait to see how it's going to be messed up by the users or the developers, who knows. But I agree with you. I think that we have to continually push ourselves. And although I remember the same thing when somebody said, hey, have you heard about Clubhouse? I was like, not another one, right? But yes. I think that we have to, as marketers, constantly be pushing ourselves to explore those, use them, beat them up a little bit, and prove to ourselves whether or not it's going to be worthwhile for us as individuals, especially if we're responsible to our companies for those things. Kathy, have I left anything out? I know that we try to keep these a little brief, but I don't know what that word is when I talk to people. So I usually run long. I usually ask that you have an extra 5 or 10 minutes to give me if we go long, but I'm going to try to get this done in the next 3 or 4 minutes. Do you have any last words for us? And if you want to plug again the Women of Martech, do what you got to do. I'm here for you.
Well, I would love to plug the Women of Martech. First of all, I do want to say, great job to the LeadsCouncil for all the efforts with the diversity and inclusion. The committee there, I think, has had some really fantastic conversations, and conversations is a big part of what needs to happen. The openness of being able to just talk about topics is hugely important right now. But since you gave me the opportunity, I really do want to suggest to everybody, all the women who are listening, Women of Martech is here for you. We'd love for you to be a member. And to all the men who are listening, look for our posts, follow Women of Martech on social media, because if you are sharing and amplifying our voices, then we just have that much more power.
Well, I think that's what we're doing, and so I'm very excited. Obviously, this being, Women History Month, I felt like this is the right thing to do. I love the organization. I love the trajectory that you guys are on. I'm envious of the trajectory you're on. So I'm learning. I'm writing down notes and trying to follow in your footsteps. But I'm certainly excited for you. I'm excited for you for all of the things that we talked about. I can't wait to have that steak in person with you, because quite honestly, I never pass up a steak, as you know. I think it's clear. But at the same point, I live for those moments as well. So I will be there with you, just clinking glasses when we're sitting down for the first time. Kathy, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I think people will love this. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rob. This has been great.
You're welcome.